Hey, I'll be reading from The Witcher, which has been the project I've been hiding for a while. So, just gonna do a last check, and here we go.
There they come.
Okay, first book, The Sword of Destiny,
Damn. Shit just got
The
real.
Bounds of Reason. Chapter 1. He won't get out of there, I'm telling you, the pockmarked man said, shaking his head with conviction. It's been an hour and a quarter since he went down. That's the end of him. The townspeople, crammed among the ruins, stared in silence at the black hole gaping in the debris. At the rubble-strewn opening, a fat man in a yellow jerkin shifted from one foot to the other, cleared his throat, and took off his crumpled beretta. Let's wait a little longer, he said, wiping the sweat from his thinning eyebrows. For what? The spotty-faced man snarled. Have you forgotten, alderman, that a basilisk is lurking in that there dungeon? No one who goes in there comes out. Haven't enough people perished? Why wait? But we struck a deal, the fat man muttered hesitantly. This just isn't right. We made a deal with a living man, alderman, said the spotty-faced man's companion, a giant in a leather butcher's apron. And now he's dead. Sure as eggs is eggs. It was plain from the start he was heading to his doom, just like the others. Why, he even went in without a looking glass, taking only a sword. And you can't kill a basilisk without a looking glass, everyone knows that. You've saved yourself a shilling, alderman, the spotty-faced man added, for there's no one to pay for the basilisk. So get off home nice and easy, and we'll take the sorcerer's horse and chattels. Shame to let goods go to waste. Aye, the butcher said, a sturdy mare and saddlebags nicely stuffed. Let's take a peek at what's inside. This isn't right. What are you doing? Quiet, alderman, and stay out of this, or you're in for a hiding, the spotty-faced man warned. Sturdy mare, the butcher repeated. Leave that horse alone, comrade. The butcher turned slowly towards the newcomer, who had appeared from a recess in the wall, and the people gathered around the entrance to the dungeon. The stranger had thick, curly chestnut hair. He was wearing a dark brown tunic over a padded coat and high riding boots, and he was not carrying a weapon. Move away from the horse, he repeated, smiling venomously. What is this? Another man's horse, saddlebags and property, and you can't take your watery little eyes off them? Can't wait to get your scabby mitts on them? Is that fitting behavior? The spotty-faced man, slowly sliding a hand under his coat, glanced at the butcher. The butcher nodded and beckoned towards a part of the crowd, from which stepped two stocky men with close-cropped hair. They were holding clubs of the kind used to stun animals in a slaughterhouse. Who are you? The spotty-faced man asked, still holding his hand inside his coat. To tell us what is right and what is not. That is not your concern, comrade. You carry no weapon. 'Tis true. The stranger smiled even more venomously. I do not. That's too bad. The spotty-faced man removed his hand, and with it a long knife from inside his coat. It is very unfortunate that you do not. The butcher also drew a knife, as long as a cutlass. The other two men stepped forward, raising their clubs. I have no need, the stranger said, remaining where he stood. My weapons follow me. Two young women came out from behind the ruins, treading with soft shoe steps. The crowd immediately parted, then stepped back and thinned out. The two women grinned, flashing their teeth and narrowing their eyes, from whose corners broad, tattooed stripes ran towards their ears. The muscles of their powerful thighs were visible beneath lynx skins wrapped around their hips, and on their sinuous arms, naked above their mail gloves. Saber hilts stuck up behind their shoulders, which were also protected by chainmail. Slowly, very slowly, the spotty-faced man bent his knees and dropped his knife on the ground. A rattle of stones and a scraping sound echoed from the hole in the rubble, and then two hands, clinging to the jagged edge of the wall, emerged from the darkness. After the hands then appeared, in turn, a head of white hair and streaked with brick dust, a pale face, and a sword hilt projecting above the shoulders. The crowd murmured. The white-haired man reached down to haul a grotesque shape from the hole, a bizarre bulk smeared in blood-soaked dust. Holding the creature by its long reptilian tail, he threw it without a word at the fat alderman's feet. He sprang back, tripping against a collapsed fragment of wall, and looked at the curved, bird-like beak, webbed wings, and the hooked talons of the scaly feet. At the swollen dewlap, once crimson, now a dirty rosette, and at the glazed, sunken eyes. "There's your basilisk," the white-haired man said, brushing the dust from his trousers, as agreed. "And now my 200 lintars, if you please. Honest lintars, not too clipped. I'll check them, you can count on it." The alderman drew out a pouch with trembling hands. The white-haired man looked around, and then fixed his gaze for a moment on the spotty-faced man and his knife lying by his foot. He looked at the man in the dark brown tunic, and at the young woman in the lynx-skins. "As usual," he said, taking the pouch from the alderman's trembling hands, "I risk my neck for you, for a paltry sum, and in the end, you go after my things. You never change. A pox on the lot of you." "Haven't been touched?" the butcher muttered, moving back. The men with the clubs had melted into the crowd long before. "Your things haven't been touched, sir." "That pleases me greatly." The white-haired man smiled. At the sight of the smile burgeoning on his pale face, like a wound bursting, the small crowd began to quickly disperse. "And for that reason, friend, you shall also remain untouched. Go in peace, but make haste." The spotty-faced man was also retreating. The spots on his white face were unpleasantly conspicuous. "Hey, stop there," the man in the dark brown tunic said to him. "You've forgotten something." "What is that, sir?" "You drew your knife on me." The taller of the women suddenly swayed, legs planted wildly apart, and twisted her hips. Her saber, which no one saw her draw, hissed sharply through the air. The spotty-faced man's head flew upwards in an arc and fell into the gaping opening to the dungeon. His body toppled stiffly and heavily, like a tree being felled, among the crushed bricks. The crowd let out a scream. The second woman, hand on her sword hilt, whirled around nimbly, protecting her partner's back. Needlessly, the crowd, stumbling and falling over on the rubble, fled towards the town as fast as they could. The alderman loped at the front with impressive strides, outdistancing the huge butcher by only a few yards. "An excellent stroke," the white-haired man commented coldly, shielding his eyes from the sun with a black-gloved hand. "An excellent stroke from a Zeracanian saber. I bow before the skill and beauty of the free warriors. I'm Geralt of Rivia." "And I," the stranger in the dark brown tunic pointed at the faded coat of arms on the front of his garment, depicting 3 black birds sitting in a row in the center of a uniformly gold field. "Am Borch, also known as 3 jackdaws, and these are my girls, Taya and Vea. That's what I call them, because you'll twist your tongue on their right names. They are both, as you correctly surmised, Zeracanian. Thanks to them, it appears, I still have my horse and belongings. I thank you, warriors. My thanks to you too, sir." 3 jackdaws. And you can drop this, sir. Does anything detain you in this little town, Geralt of Rivia? Quite the opposite. Excellent. I have a proposal. Not far from here, at the crossroads on the road to the riverport, is an inn. It's called the Pensive Dragon. The Fatals there have no equal in these parts. I'm heading there with food and lodging in mind. It would be my honor should you choose to keep me company. Borch. The white-haired man turned around from his horse and looked into the stranger's bright eyes. "I wouldn't want anything left unclear between us, for I'm a witcher." "I guess as much. But you say it was you might have said, I'm a leper." "There are those," Geralt said slowly, "who prefer the company of lepers to that of a witcher. There are also those," the jackdaws laughed, "who prefer sheep to girls. Ah well, one can only sympathize with the former and the latter. I repeat my proposal." Geralt took off his glove and shook the hand being proffered. "I accept. Glad to have made an acquaintance. And then let us go, for I hunger." Chapter 2. The innkeeper wiped the rough tabletop with a cloth, bowed and smiled. 2 of his front teeth were missing. "Right then." 3 jackdaws looked up for a while at the blackened ceiling and the spiders dancing about beneath it. First beer. To save your legs, an entire keg. And to go with the beer, what do you propose with the beer, comrade?" Cheese? Raised the innkeeper. No, George promised. We'll have cheese for dessert. We want something sour and spicy with the beer. At your service, the innkeeper smiled even more broadly. His 2 front teeth were not the only ones he lacked. Alvers with garlic and olive oil and green pepper. Pods in vinegar or marinated. Very well, we'll take both. And then that soup I once ate here, with diverse mollusks, little fish, and the other tasty morsels floating in it. Log diver soup? The very same. And then roast lamb with onions. And then 3 score crayfish. Throw as much dill in the pot as you can. After that, sheep cheese and lettuce. And then we'll see. At your service. Is that for everyone? I mean 4 times. The taller Zeracanian shook her head, patting herself knowingly on her waist, which was now hugged by a tight linen blouse. I forgot, 3 jackals winked at Geralt. The girls are watching the figures. Lamb just for the 2 of us, innkeeper. Serve the beer right now, was what Elvis. No, wait. So that they don't go cold. We didn't come here to stuff ourselves, but to simply spend some time in conversation. Very good, the innkeeper bowed once more. Prudence is a matter of import in your profession. Give me your hand, comrade. Gold coins jingled. The innkeeper opened his cap-toothed mouth to the limit. That is not an advance, the jackdaws announced. It is a bonus, and a hurry off to the kitchen, good fellow. It was warm in the snug. Geralt unbuckled his belt, took off his tunic, and rolled up his shirt sleeves. I see, he said, that you aren't troubled by a shortage of funds. Do you live with the privileges of a knightly estate? Partially, the jackdaw smiled, without offering further details. They dealt quickly with the Elvers and a quarter of the keg. Neither of the 2 Zeracanians stinted on the beer, and soon both were in very good humor. They were whispering something to each other. Vea, the taller one, suddenly burst out in throaty laughter. Are the warriors versed in the common speech? Geralt asked quietly, sneaking a sideways glance at them. Poorly, and they're not garrulous, for which they deserve credit. How do you find the soup, Geralt? Let us drink. Geralt? Three jackdaws began, putting aside his spoon and hiccoughing in a dignified manner. I wish to return for a moment to the conversation we had on the road. I understand that you, a witcher, wander from one end of the world to the other, and should you come across a monster along the way, you kill it, and you earn money doing that. Does that describe the witcher's trade? More or less. And does it ever happen that someone specifically summons you somewhere, on a special commission, let's say? Then what? You go and carry it out? That depends on who asks me and why, and for how much. That too, the witcher shrugged. Prices are going up. And one has to low, as a sorcerer's acquaintance of mine used to say. Quite a selective approach, very practical, I'd say. But at the root of it lies some idea, Geralt. The conflict between the forces of order and the forces of chaos. As a sorcerer acquaintance of mine used to say, I imagine that you carry out your mission, defending people from evil, always and everywhere, without distinction. You stand on a clearly defined side of the palisade. The forces of order, the forces of chaos. Awfully high-flown words, Borch. You desperately want to position me on one side of the palisade in a conflict, which is generally thought to be perennial. Began long before us and will endure long after we've gone. On which side does the farrier shoeing horses stand? Or our innkeeper, hurrying here with a cauldron of lamb? What, in your opinion, defines the border between order and chaos? A very simple thing, said the jackdaws, and looked him straight in the eye. That which represents chaos is a menace, is the aggressive side, while order is the side being threatened, in need of protection, in need of a defender. But let us drink, and make a start on the lamb. Rightly said. The Zeracanians, watching their figures, were taking a break from eating. Thomas began drinking more quickly. Vea, leaning over on her companion's shoulder, whispered something again, brushing the tabletop with her plate. Thea, the shorter of the 2, laughed loudly, cheerfully narrowing her tattooed eyelids. Yes, Borch said, picking a bone clean. Let us continue our talk, if you will. I understand you aren't keen on being placed on either side. You do your job. That's correct. But you cannot escape the conflict between chaos and order. Although it was a comparison, you are not a farrier. I've seen you work. You go down into a dungeon among some ruins and come up with a slaughtered basilisk. There is, comrade, a difference between shoeing horses and killing basilisks. You said that if the payment is fair, you'll hurry to the end of the world and dispatch the master you're asked to. Let's say a fierce dragon is wreaking havoc on a bad example, Geralt interrupted. You see right away you've mixed up chaos and order. Because I do not kill dragons, and they without a doubt represent chaos. How so? Three Jackdaws licked his finger. Well, I never. After all, among all monsters, dragons are probably the most bestial, the cruelest and fiercest, the most revolting of reptiles. They attack people, breathe fire, carry off, girls. There's no shortage of tales like that. It can't be that you, a witcher, don't have a few dragons on your trophy list. I don't hunt dragons, Geralt said dryly. I hunt forktails for sure, and draco-lizards, and flying drakes. But not true dragons, the green, the black, or the red. Take note, please. You astonish me, Three Jackdaws said. Very well, I've taken note. In any case, that's enough about dragons for the moment. I see something red on the horizon, and it is surely our crayfish. Let us drink. Their teeth crunched through the red shells, and they sucked out the white flesh. The salt water, stinging painfully, trickled down over their wrists. Torch poured the beer, by now scraping the ladle across the bottom of the keg. The Zeracanians were even more cheerful, the two of them looking around the inn and smiling ominously. The Witcher was convinced they were searching for an opportunity to brawl. Three Jackdaws must also have noticed, because he suddenly shook a crayfish who was holding by the tail at them. The woman giggled. Dea pouted her lips for a kiss and winked. Combined with her tattooed face, this made for a gruesome sight. They are as savage as wildcats, Three Jackdaws murmured to Geralt. They need watching. With them, comrade, suddenly before you know it, the floor's covered in guts. But they're worth every penny. If you knew what they're capable, I know, Geralt nodded. You couldn't find a better escort. Zeracanians are born warriors, trained to fight from childhood. I didn't mean that. Bort spat a crayfish clone to the table. I meant what they're like in bed. Geralt glanced anxiously at the woman. They both smiled. Vea reached for the dish with a swift, almost imperceptible movement. And looking at the Witcher through narrowed eyes, she bit open a shell with a crack. Her lips glistened with the salt water. Three Jackdaws belched loudly. And so, Geralt, he said, you don't hunt dragons, neither green nor any other color. I've made a note of it. And why, may I ask, only those three colors? 4, to be precise. You mentioned 3. Dragons interest you, Borsch. For any particular reason? No, pure curiosity. Well, about those colors, it's customary to define true dragons like that, although they are not precise terms. Green dragons are the most common, or actually greyish, like ordinary draco-lizards. Red dragons are in fact reddish or brick red. It's customary to call the large dark brown ones black. White dragons are the rarest. I've never seen one. They occur in the distant north, reputedly. Interesting. And do you know what other dragons I've also heard about? I do. Geralt sipped his beer. The same ones I've heard about. Golden dragons. There are no such creatures. On what grounds do you claim that? Because you've never seen one? Apparently you haven't seen a white one either. That's not the point. Beyond the seas, in Ophir and Zengvabar, there are white horses with black stripes. I haven't seen them, but I know they exist. But golden dragons are mythical creatures, fabled, like the phoenix, let's say. There are no phoenixes or gold dragons. Fea, leaning on her elbows, looked at him curiously. You must know what you're talking about. You're a witcher. Torch ladled beer from the keg. But I think that every myth, every fable must have some roots. Something lies among those roots. It does, Geralt confirmed. Most often a dream, a wish, a desire, a yearning. Faith that there are no limits to possibility. And occasionally, chance. Precisely, chance. Perhaps there once was a golden dragon. An accidental, unique mutation. If there was, it met the fate of all mutants. The Witcher turned his head away. It differed too much to endure. Ha, the jackdaw said. Now you are denying the laws of nature, Geralt. My sorcerer acquaintance was wont to say that every being has its own continuation in nature and survives in some way or another. The ending of one is the beginning of another. There are no limits to possibility, or at least nature doesn't know any. Your sorcerer acquaintance was a great optimist, but he failed to take one thing into consideration, a mistake committed by nature, or by those who trifle with it. Golden dragons and other similar mutants, were they to exist, couldn't survive, for a very natural limit of possibilities prevented. What limit is that? Mutants. The muscles in Geralt's jaw twitched violently. Mutants are sterile, Borch. Only in fables survives what cannot survive in nature. Only myths and fables do not know the limits of possibility. Three jackdaws said nothing. Geralt looked at the Zerrikanians, at their faces, suddenly grown serious. Freya unexpectedly leant over towards him and put a hard, muscular arm around his neck. He felt her lips, wet from beer on his cheek. They like you, the jackdaw said slowly. Well, I'll be damned. They like you. What's strange about that? The Witcher smiled sadly. Nothing. But you must drink to it. Innkeeper, another keg. Take it easy. A pitcher at most. 2 pitchers, the jackdaws yelled. Thea, I have to go out for a while. The Zerrikanian stood up, took her saber from the bench, and swept the room with a wistful gaze. Although previously, as the Witcher had observed, several pairs of eyes had lit up greedily at the sight of Borch's bulging purse, no one seemed in a hurry to go after him as he staggered slightly towards the door to the courtyard. Thea shrugged, following her employer. What is your real name? Geralt asked the one who had remained at the table. Thea flashed her white teeth. Her blouse was very loosely laced, almost to the limits of possibility. The Witcher had no doubt it was intentionally provocative. Alvier Merle. Pretty. The Witcher was sure the Zerrikanian who would purse her lips and wink at him. He was not mistaken. Vea? Why did you ride with Borch? You, 3 warriors. Would you mind telling me? What? He is... The Zerrikanian woman, frowning, searched for the words. He is... the most beautiful. The Witcher nodded. Not for the first time. The criteria by which women judged the attractiveness of men remained a mystery to him. 3 jackdaws lurched back into the snug, fastening his trousers, and issued loud instructions to the innkeeper. Thea, walking 2 steps behind him, feigning boredom, looked around the inn, and the merchants and log drivers carefully avoided her gaze. Vea was sucking the contents from another crayfish and continuously throwing the Witcher meaningful glances. I've ordered us an eel each, baked this time. 3 jackdaws sat down heavily, his unfastened belt clinking. I struggled with those crayfish and seemed to have worked up an appetite. And I've organized a bed for you, Geralt. There's no sense in you roaming around tonight, because we'll amuse ourselves. Here's to you, girls. Vaskel, Thea said, saluting him with her beaker. Thea winked and stretched, and her bosom, contrary to Geralt's expectations, did not split at the front of her blouse. Let's make merry. 3 jackdaws leant across the table and slapped Thea on the backside. Let's make merry, Witcher. Hey, landlord, over here. The innkeeper scuttled briskly over, wiping his hands on his apron. Could you lay your hands on a tub? The kind you launder clothes in, sturdy and large. How large, sir? For 4 people. 4. The innkeeper opened his mouth. 4. 3 jackdaws confirmed, drawing a full purse from his pocket. I could. The innkeeper licked his lips. Splendid, Borch laughed. Have it carried upstairs to my room and filled with hot water. With all speed, comrade. And have beer brought there too. 3 pitchers. The Zerrikanians giggled and winked at the same time. Which one do you prefer? 3 jackdaws asked. Eh, Geralt? The Witcher scratched the back of his head. I know it's difficult to choose, said 3 jackdaws, understandingly. I occasionally have difficulty myself. Never mind. We'll give it some time on the tub. Hey girls, help me upstairs. Chapter 3. There was a barrier on the bridge. The way was barred by a long, solid beam set on wooden trestles. In front and behind it stood halberdiers in studded leather coats and mail hoods. A purple banner wearing the emblem of a silver griffin fluttered lazily above the barrier. What the devil? Three jackdaws said in surprise, approaching at a walk. Is there no way through? Got a safe conduct? The nearest halberdier asked, without taking the stick he was chewing, either from hunger or to kill time. From his mouth, safe conduct? What is it, the plague? Or war, perhaps? On whose orders do you obstruct the way? Those of King Nidamar, Lord of Cairngorm, the guardsman replied, shifting the stick to the other side of his mouth and pointing at the banner. Without a safe conduct, you can't go up. Some sort of idiocy, Geralt said in a tired voice. This isn't Cairngorm, but Bearfield's territory. Bearfield, not Cairngorm. Heavy stalls on the bridges on the Brua. But what has Nidamar to do with it? Don't ask me, the guard said, spitting out his stick. Not my business. I'm here to check safe conduct. If you want, talk to our Decurion. And where might he be? He's basking in the sun over there, behind the toll collector's lodgings, the halberdier said, looking not at Geralt, but at the naked thighs of the Zeracanians, who were stretching languidly in their saddles. Behind the toll collector's cottage sat a guard on a pile of dry logs, drawing a woman in the sand with the end of his halberd. It was actually a certain part of a woman, seen from an unusual perspective. Beside him, a slim man with a fanciful plume bonnet pulled down over his eyes, adorned with a silver buckle and a long, twitching heron's feather, was reclining gently, plucking the strings of a lute. Geralt knew that bonnet and that feather, which were famed from the Buina to the Yoruga, known in manor houses, fortresses, inns, taverns, and whorehouses, particularly whorehouses. Dandelion, Geralt the Witcher, a pair of cornflower blue eyes shone from under the bonnet, now shoved back to his head. Well, I never! You're here too! You don't have a safe conduct by any chance? What's everyone's problem with this safe conduct? The Witcher dismounted. What's happening here, Dandelion? We wanted to cross the Bra, myself and this knight, Brosh. 3 jackdaws, and our escort, and we cannot, it appears. I can't either. Dandelion stood up, took off his bonnet, and bowed to the Zeracanians with exaggerated courtesy. They don't want to let me cross either. This Decurion here won't let me. Dandelion, the most celebrated minstrel and poet within 1,000 miles, although he's also an artist, as you can see. I won't let anyone cross without a safe conduct, the Decurion said. No matter, the Witcher said. We'll ride along the left bank. The road to Hengfors is longer that way, but needs must. To Hengfors? The bard said, surprised. Aren't you following Nidamar, Geralt? And the dragon? What dragon? The jackdaws asked with interest. You don't know? You really don't know? Oh, I shall have to tell you everything, gentlemen. I'm waiting here in any case. Perhaps someone who knows me will come with a safe conduct and let me join them. Please, be seated. Just a moment, the jackdaw said. The sun is almost a quarter to the noontide and I have an awful thirst. We cannot talk on an empty stomach. Thea, head back to town at a trot and buy a keg. I'd like to cut off your jibe, sire. Borch, also known as 3 jackdaws. Dandelion, also known as the Unparalleled, by certain girls. Talk, Dandelion, the Witcher said impatiently. We aren't going to loiter around here till evening. The bard seized the fingerboard of his lute and plucked the strings vigorously. How would you prefer it, in verse or in normal speech? Normal speech. As you please, Dandelion said, not putting his lute down. Listen then, noble gentleman, to what occurred a week ago near the free town of Bearfield. And for now, that's it. I'm going to end it.
Good job, Rangers.
So,
Hi again. And they are
hope you enjoyed.
arriving soon. Ready to tell my